Okay, I thought I'd use this guitar here to talk about a little bit of the process of working on a guitar from a luthier's perspective, and it's just my take on things over the years. But whenever I work on an instrument, the first thing is always just that initial first impression when I see the instrument, and that's instantaneous. And then within a matter of a couple minutes, I'll have an idea of what the instrument needs, and it may end up needing more or less or whatever, but it's usually a well-informed assessment of what the guitar needs. And then from there, I'll move on to taking some measurements and really understanding what's in front of me. So first impression and kind of an initial assessment of it needs this or that, and then I'll dig in and get some specs. This particular guitar is a Fender Stratocaster, a mid-80s, when it was made during a time where there were no American-made Fender guitars. So this is a made in Japan Fender Stratocaster. And I usually try to steer away from any sort of opinion, but these are nice instruments, and it is my opinion that they're undervalued, they're underappreciated, so they're a good buy for the price that they fetch. This particular guitar, my first impression of it when I saw it was that it has all kinds of untapped potential, and the reason that I say that is as soon as I saw it, I could tell it has not been played often, and it hasn't been played in a very long time. And it's got oxidation and crud built up on the frets. The strings are very, very old. There's some surface rust on the pickups. There's some surface rust on the bridge. The neck right now is in an up bow condition, hopefully just from sitting a long, long time with string tension on it. And I hope that the truss rod is in good working condition. And so the paint on the body is in really nice condition. It's very clean, but it's been sitting a long, long time, and it needs a good setup and detail job overall. And from there, I'm going to take some measurements of the specs. How much neck bow is there? How much up bow is there in the neck right now? I'm not really concerned about how high the strings are up off the fingerboard, but I usually take that measurement as well. And there's, right now a little bit of the bridge up off the body, which is a fairly stock Fender way to do it. So I'm not real worried about the string height or the action as much as I am this neck bow. I want to see where that's at. Beyond that, it's pretty clean. There's a little bend to the lever on the lever style switch, which it seems to be moving just fine, but see if I can straighten that, maybe replace it. So once I have the idea of what I want to do, I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to listen to the electronics, see if there's anything wrong with that. I'm going to check the fret height. The frets are in really good condition. There's no divots in the frets, so that's what tells me it really hasn't been played a lot. The next thing to look at on the back here that was interesting to me, it's got the original plate. There's no marring to the screws, so this hasn't come on and off very often. This may have never come off, I don't know, but there's really no marring to the screws. There's no bend to the plate. But on the back of the headstock, there's a number 7. That's where a sticker was, and the sunlight, indoor light, has been hitting this maple, and it's changed color slowly over time. It's taken on a patina, and then you remove that sticker, and this wood has not been exposed to the light, so there's an imprint of that sticker left behind just from the oxidation in the wood. There's also a number scratched into the finish, and it doesn't look haphazard as if a kid got bored and just scratched a number in there. It looks like this was perhaps some sort of asset number. It actually looks like a social security number, but between that 7 being on there and then a specific number on there, this was probably either belonged to a prison or some other government type facility. Maybe it was just a school of some sort, and they just carved a number into it so that they could keep a record of that particular asset. I'll go with that it was a prison guitar, and that makes it seem cooler to me. But that's really the only issue with the finish, and I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. I'm just going to leave it there. It's part of the guitar as far as I'm concerned. The rest of it's really nice and clean. So I think it's time to probably start taking measurements, neck bow, fret height, check if any of the frets are rocking, if it needs a fret dress. I don't think the frets need to be replaced. And then once I get those specs written down, I'm going to pop this neck off and check how well this truss rod functions. My hope is that it works just fine because it's hardly ever been used or turned, but I don't know until I get the neck off of there. All right, let's get this tuned to pitch and see what we're working with. There's no sense in continuing to tune it up at this point. The back of the bridge is pulling up and up and up, and so that's an imbalance to the bridge. There's too much string tension, not enough spring tension pulling it back down. So I'm not going to worry about that until I do the setup. So let's see if the electronics are working okay. Scratchy switch. Alright, so we know we got to clean the switch or replace it. Clean those pots just as a matter of good practice. Alright, so let's get rid of these strings. I usually like to just turn all of them vertical, get in there with my string winder, and I'm holding on to the strings here because this bridge is going to be moving as I slack the strings, and that's going to increase the tension on other strings, and potentially a string will break. And if you've ever been slapped in the face with a broken guitar string or across the arm, it's, you know, less than appealing. So I will hold on to the strings, hold on to the neck while I do that. And then they're nice and slack right now. I've always just gone ahead and clipped it right around the 3rd fret just because I can hold on to the strings with my left hand. Oh, it's a little tight. Gives me enough string to grab onto. Way too many windings around the post. Now I can take them out of the bridge, and sometimes the strings will get stuck in these bridges in the plate. All these are coming out fine. And now I'm going to take this neck off. There's a small shim, and it looks like it's glued in. I suspect that's from the factory. Don't know that for sure. The neck stamp ST362V7, STD62 on the body pocket. What I'm really concerned about is how well does this work. Another little thing that I notice is that there's buffing compound in and around the nut on the truss rod. This might be the first time this neck has ever come off the guitar. I'm going to just tighten this a tiny bit and see how it feels to turn. And it feels really good. So that's a good sign. Feels like there's plenty of life left to that truss rod, and that was my #1 concern. So I think this is working really, really well. Alright, so the first thing I'd like to check here, there's a tiny, tiny bit of fret wear. But I'm going to check for fret height. Put that little notch in my caliper right on the fret. That's great. 40 thousandths for fret height, especially in the first position there. 42 thousandths. Definitely does not need any sort of refret. So let's check how level these frets are. Spanning 3 frets at a time, I'm lightly pressing with the rocker to see if the middle fret happens to be high. Again, a light touch. These frets are pretty nice and level so far. And I'm a pretty happy camper right now because these are nice and level. There was one right there at the 8th fret. Rocks just a little bit. Looks like the 10th fret here too. So only a couple of small fret rocks, which for an old guitar like this, that's fantastic. So here's a close-up of the bridge, and this sort of surface rust is not unusual. This guitar is sometime between 1984 and 1987. So it's got some surface rust. The screws are rusted a little bit. You can see oxidation and rust on the pickguard screws. That's not unusual of a guitar of this age. I'm going to completely disassemble the bridge and take it off of the guitar, break it down, and I'm going to soak this in solvent with a little bit of oil. And even before I turn a screw, I'm going to put some oil on this. One of the issues with the old vintage style Strat bridges are there's 6 mounting screws here, and that's a lot of metal on metal contact. So we'll try to address a little bit of that when we reassemble. And then the stamped steel saddles sometimes have burrs right around that opening and down inside under the saddle where the string comes through this plate on the bridge. It tends to be a little sharp and they can break. So if you've ever experienced that, there's a way to address that. And that's kind of what I consider detailing one of these bridges, is getting in there and taking care of all the sharp edges and making sure everything is well lubricated and clean it up. I'm not going to try to make these look brand new. This is an old guitar. And some people are paying good money to have a brand new bridge look something like this, probably not as pitted and rusted, but it's a perfectly workable bridge as far as I'm concerned. Here's a shot of the pickups. Again, kind of surface rust and oxidation. Maybe it was stored in a damp environment, so there's some rust on the pole pieces. So I'll probably clean these up. A lot of people would replace these pickups in this guitar, and you know, I can't blame them. When I offer it up for sale, I will probably offer an optional set of pickups that I install. Maybe even install them for free with the purchase of the pickups, who knows. But I would include these pickups with the guitar because they're original, and I just personally like to keep things original. To me, this is all original, so I would at least keep it with the guitar. Again, this is not a high-end, super valuable vintage instrument, but you know, I kind of come from a conservation restoration background, so it's hard for me to just go swapping things out willy-nilly. This switch is a little bit bent. If you look straight down on it, you can see that it's bent. It's a little scratchy. It's going to get cleaned. The knobs are pretty dirty. Probably take those off and clean those and detail those. The screws, I'll leave them original. Some people will go so far as to even keep track of where the screw came out of. Sometimes you can kind of tell the ones by a person's hand where they're playing get more rusty than other ones, perhaps, like that one. It just depends on where the person's playing and sweating, what ends up happening to those screws a lot of the time. So again, not a super high-end vintage guitar, but I don't know, I like to try to keep things as they were as much as possible. So after all is said and done, what is the plan for this guitar? I'm going to clean and lubricate the threads of the truss rod. I'm going to give it a complete fret dress, level, crowned, and polish. Make sure those are perfect. I'm going to get in and clean the electronics, clean the switch. If I need to replace the switch, I will. I'm going to clean up the pickup pole pieces, get rid of that rust. And I might offer a set of alternate pickups for sale with the guitar. If somebody wants to pay for the pickups, I'll install them for free. And then I'm going to disassemble, clean, and detail the bridge, get rid of any sharp edges, lubricate all the parts, put those back together, and then I'll finish it out with a complete setup, intonation, the whole thing, and that guitar will play better than it has probably ever.